Welcome, Freedom Builders. You are joined again. Thanks for joining and tuning in again to our weekly coaching session. Today, I'm joined by Lenny. Lenny, how's it going?
Great. Thanks for having me again, Rolando. I'm excited to be here and answer some questions.
And you know the drill. We're going to begin by answering the questions that were submitted earlier in the week in the previous post. And then we'll just start tackling any live questions. And I do see that there's quite a number of questions already, and really good questions there, solid questions. So we'll jump right into it and tackle all these questions. So,
alrighty,
let me go ahead and pull that up. Looks like Angela has the first question. She's asking, my product is listed in Canada, even though I haven't listed it. The price is about 3 times the US price. Why is it listed in Canada? And what can I do to correct this? From the sounds of it, if you haven't initiated this, I imagine there's probably a buyer. What you'll want to do is you'll want to go into the listing, and it'll tell you there's a little link where it shows the seller to see who's selling it. And you can see if it's being sold by someone else. They probably purchased it. And because they're selling it 3 times, basically what they're doing is they're trying to make a profit. It's like a form of retail arbitrage that they're trying to do on your product. What you can do is you could, as we talk about in, in previous coaching sessions, you could send them a nice cease and desist letter to kind of nudge them and encourage them not to sell your product. And so we don't have, unfortunately, a template for a cease and desist letter. If you just Google cease and desist letter, you can kind of get the idea, the gist of it. And I would just message them directly and send them a cease and desist letter. You could also contact Amazon, seller support, and put in a complaint there. So those would be your 2 options, and hopefully they work. Typically, if there's just a few products that they have of yours, it's no big deal. They're just trying to make a buck, and it won't harm you in any way. That's what we talk about. Sometimes even in your US, let's say your US account that you have, you might see some additional sellers that are trying to sell the product. They probably bought at a discount. They're trying to make a quick buck. So just let them sell off, and it should be no harm, no foul. All right.
Cool. All right. Next one is also from Angela. Can you reopen a listing once it is closed? Stephen Pope said that if you're going to be out of stock for 2 months or more, close the listing. What benefit would this have? And if I close the listing, am I able to reopen it once I'm back in stock? So yes, you can. And I believe the main benefit here is that if you're out of stock for a long period of time, I believe it can start to affect your the IPI score, or it's and sort of like your sell-through rate. It's telling Amazon that you've got these listings active, but you're not selling, and therefore you're selling at a slow rate, which can basically just affect your account. And so that would be, I think, the reasoning here to close your listing is to kind of keep Amazon happy rather than having a listing available to customers when there's not actually stock available. All right. I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, no, that's definitely, that's exactly the reason, is it does impact your IPI score. So to avoid that, you can temporarily close it, and then you can just reactivate it once your product arrives.
Yep.
Angela has the next one, it looks like.
Ties in well to yesterday's webinar.
Can we keyword stuff the text in A+ content? Yes, this is a place where you can keyword stuff, but I always say, keep in mind, make it relevant to the image. Don't just put a text for the sake of being a text. So if it's a picture of a puppy, Lenny's selling the puppy pee pads, the alt text there could be, and it's a puppy, could be like puppy with, pee pad. I don't know. It just depends on what keywords you're targeting, and just make it relevant, because in the end, It could hurt you inversely if it's just not relevant to what the image is. We really don't know what Amazon does with this information, but from different sellers and different experiences that they've shared with us, they do say that it plays some form of relevance. So definitely worth doing it. We never know how Amazon's algorithm ranks that information, but yeah, it's just good to have there.
Yeah, we had a great webinar yesterday on how to optimize your listing for Prime Day, or just how to optimize it in general. And so Jake from the Jungle Scout team shares a lot of great tips there. And this is actually one of the things that he talks about. He went through and created A+ content for the washable pee pads that I'm selling. And yeah, the long and short of it is that, like Rolando said, Amazon hasn't stated that they index the keywords from A+ content. They definitely don't say that, but there's no harm in putting them in there, because we've talked to different sellers that there are some sellers that do believe that it has had an impact. So I think it's definitely worthwhile. Actually, I think Stephen Pope is one of those examples. I think he was like saying that in a JungleCon session where he kind of ran an experiment. I think it was with his A+ content where he put Spanish keywords in there that he wasn't previously ranking for. And then despite the fact that Amazon says or doesn't say whether they index or not, it turns out that he started ranking for them. So it definitely doesn't hurt.
Cool. Yeah, I was definitely, Steve Pope mentioned that. That's pretty cool. I also dropped a link to yesterday's webinar in case you missed it. It's an excellent webinar. You want to check it out in preparation for Prime Day, so that you can get your listings completely optimized.
Okay.
Looks like Angela has the next question. Does the bill of lading Talix release need to be signed? Yes, it does. However, typically, if you're using a freight forwarder, they sign on your behalf. They're like almost like a power of attorney. In fact, you probably signed a power of attorney with your freight forwarder in the setup process. So that's not something that you typically would have to even deal with or bother with, if that makes any sense.
Cool. The next one's from Dan, who says, hello, FBB fam. So what do you do when you're in the JS supplier database or tracker and you're trying to find a supplier? You're inputting everything from the name, how you see it on their webpage, to the product you're trying to source, and you can't find the supplier's name. So damn frustrating. Should I assume they're not legit? This has happened before. Any suggestions? Yeah, so probably just outright the thing to know with supplier database is that you're not going to find every single supplier 100% of the time. There are definitely like certain scenarios where that information isn't, I guess, like cataloged or captured when products are imported into the US, because that's where we're getting the information from in supplier database. So unfortunately, it's not something that you're always going to find a supplier. I personally don't rely on supplier database, knowing the fact that I'm not always going to be able to find suppliers. And when I am able to get that data, then it's just nice supplemental data to whatever else I can find out about the supplier. So yeah, I know that's super frustrating and not the answer that you want, but unfortunately, that's just the reality. We're just capturing the, I can't remember the name, the import documents or whatever it's called, that's freely available out there. So we can't control if that data exists or not, but if it does exist, you should be able to find it for that particular supplier, but not all of them will display there.
Yeah. And just to add to that, you can file directly with the U.S. Customs what's called an electronic vessel manifest confidentiality, like a document or form. And that's why it's we can only take the information that's available to the public. And so that's where supplier database pulls from. If a supplier So one thing that to keep in mind as well, that supplier database, what it tends to what people put on these manifests is their LLC, right, or their company name or their fictitious name. They're not going to put the Amazon name, so you will not be able to find, if you're trying to like backtrack and the store name is Supplies R Us, and you try to type that into supplier database, the likelihood of you being able to find the supplier is almost none, because most sellers know not to have their store name match their company name. So typically that's what's going to be on the manifest, or that is what's on the manifest. So that's why it's hard to trace back, to try to to do it do it in a fashion of like reverse engineer it. That's not a way to use supplier database. But in some cases, if you can pin down the company name or the fictitious name, that might help. In addition to that, though, so that's step one. But then, so you found the company name, their legal name, their legal entity name. Well, now they could have taken that extra step to mask their information from through the U.S. Customs. And I'll drop a link as to the write-up on this issue, and I'll put it in the comment section. But you'll understand the whole process. So that's why it's not 100% accurate, and we can't always nail it 100% of the time. There's just a lot of moving parts. But whatever is publicly known through the Freedom of Information Act, we're able to retrieve that and use that in supplier database.
Cool. All right, next question is from Rachna, who asks, if a listing is not converting well, is this a wise strategy to follow? Stop PPC, work on the images again, completely change all the 7 images and basically optimize your listing, and then relaunch with aggressive PPC after a few days. If we're taking some time to redo our images, do you recommend to close the listing and then relist with new images, or just stop doing PPC while we work on new images? Okay, great question. And I feel like maybe this is partly personal preference. I can share what I would do. I'm personally someone that I certainly wouldn't close my listing during that time. I'd maybe consider stopping PPC or pulling back on PPC. However, in most cases, I personally wouldn't stop PPC. I would just continue to run PPC and get the images and the listing as optimized as you can, or as quickly as you can. So one good example of this is the washable pee pads that I'm selling for the $1 million case study. I was very bullish on just kind of getting the product launched, getting some initial sales. And so I turned on aggressive PPC from day one, and I didn't have my listing optimized. It was, I was a little bit bummed about that, but I went ahead and wanted to just keep pushing to get sales regardless. So I had iPhone images. I only had description instead of A+ content. And in fact, we ended up selling out of the first almost 500 units. And whilst the second lot of the shipment is actually on the way now, actually only this week, finally got the listings updated with nicer photos and with A+ content yesterday. So that's my strategy, is I wouldn't turn off PPC. And I wouldn't do that because I also feel like that gives you that sense of urgency. If you're spending money and you're like, I know this listing could be more optimized, then it's going to force you to like make it happen quicker. However, if you're experiencing a very low ACOS, losing a lot of money, then by all means, it might make a lot of sense to turn off PPC. So it's really up to you, but I wouldn't close the listing unless it's a really, really long time. But I'm assuming that you're talking about days or maybe a week or something like that. But I wouldn't turn off the listing unless it's a long period of time. I don't know if you have differing thoughts, Rolando.
I would agree. Yeah, there's no point in closing the listing and then relisting. Typically, the goal, once you've created the listing, is you do tests and experiments and you change and you tweak things. And that's the only way you're going to find out what works. Closing the listing, you're going to lose any positive reviews that you've had there. and because it sounds like you want to create an entirely new listing. But that would be, I wouldn't necessarily go that route. And what you could do in the meantime is definitely you could go in and lower how much you're putting towards PPC. If if you have a high budget right now, just bring it down your daily budget. That could be one option, because the goal is to continue to give it some traction while these images are coming. And yeah, ideally, once hopefully those images don't take too long, then the test does happen. I've talked about this, about A/B testing. You'll want to, you usually want to test one element at a time, because to see what is that's impacting your listing. So for example, you might want to test your main image first, and then see if that, if that's what's causing the problems. However, if you, let's say like what Lenny did with the $1 Million Case Study, originally he just took it with his mobile phone, and then he had professional photos done. So yeah, changing out, just photos from an iPhone shoot versus, professional photos, then you would want to switch them all out. So it sounds like that's what you're doing. So yeah, keep that PPC going, because you want that momentum still. You want that sales velocity that you're getting from that. And hopefully you'll get those images rather quickly. All right. Looks like Rashna has the next question. If we have a product selling as a 5-piece bundle in our next inventory order, can we change it to a 10-piece bundle?
You could add a variation. Yeah. Oh, sorry. You go, Rolando.
I don't know. Go for it, Lenny.
Just I suppose, assuming that you're selling a 5-pack of something, and then you want to now change it to a 10-pack, what you can probably do is add a variation onto that listing, so that you've maintained your 5-pack variation, but you've added on a new one that's a 10-pack variation, and now that would generate a brand new FN SKU. So it acts as another product or another listing, but that's confusing. But it's just gives you a new FN SKU, but it's still all housed under the same listing. So if you've already generated 50 reviews on this listing selling the 5-pack, you can add the second variation and start selling a 10-pack under that same listing, and still maintain all the reviews that you've gotten so far. Yeah, if that makes sense. So assuming that that's the scenario you're referring to, that's what I'd recommend here.
Yeah, and it sounds like your next order, you're going to up it to 10-piece bundle. You're probably better off in that scenario creating a new listing altogether, because it's going to feed off of, there's a lot that you're going to have to change on your listing to get it optimized to the point that you incorporated the 10-piece bundle. Alternatively, if you have a 5-piece bundle and you wanted to just match it and pair it with a different variant, there is what's called virtual bundling through Amazon. So that's something that you might want to consider. If there's two different variants in terms of the 5 pieces, one variant and the other 5 pieces a different variant, you could do a virtual bundle. And Amazon essentially on your listing will put right below the image where your description and image are, it'll say people typically purchase these together, and it'll kind of show the pair. So that would be a virtual bundle. But ultimately, if you are changing the product, I think the best alternative there is to just start with a new listing altogether. I don't know, Lenny, what are your thoughts? Because it sounds like that's what's happening, is that he's reordering and he's going to change it to a 10-piece bundle.
Yeah, I suppose it's hard to know without the full context, but I guess it would depend on whether, like, how different it is. If it's a completely different product, or there's some significant changes, then I'd agree it'd be best to change the listing. But if it's the same product but just a higher number of pieces per bundle, then I think it'd still be okay to have it as a variation. So for example, at the moment, I'm selling a 3-pack of the washable pee pads. If I now wanted to sell a 5-pack of just kind of the same thing, but just with more inside of that pack, I would actually add that as a variation onto my listing so that people have the option of either, or over time, if I find that the 5-pack is more profitable, then I just don't have to restock the 3-pack, and the 5-pack will just be the one that continues to, operate on that listing. But as long as it's the same, really, it's actually the same product, I think it can live on the same listing. That way you don't lose your reviews. But if I was selling something considerably different, then a new listing would be better.
Yeah, good call. I completely overlooked that option too, where you could just add as like a variant within the overall listing, which would be the best alternative. All right.
Gotcha.
Looks like Rashna has the next question. If we have only 10 units left in stock, can we close a listing even if our previous orders are FBA pending, payment pending? Will I be able to use the request a review button after closing the listing? So the simple answer to that is yes and yes. You can close a listing even though you still have units available, and it will just Amazon will do what it needs to do to get your orders fulfilled that already have been placed. And you still can use for purchases. The request a review button is for a purchase that's already been processed. So it still functions even after the listing is closed. So all that, by closing listing, all that does is that it no longer makes it public facing, so that people can go and purchase at that point in time. So that's why it's not gonna. It's probably the most effective way to avoid affecting your IPI score. But in the end, being out of stock does play an impact. You'll just have to kind of rebuild your listing in terms of where you rank. So that's the only disadvantage, right, of stocking out. I'll let you tackle the next one.
Cool. All right. The next one from Rachna is, if we sell a generic product, for example, a carabiner, but our differentiation is only the shape and color design of the carabiner. These are sold in op bags with FNSKU labels on it. Anyone can copy the design and sell in an op bag packaging. How do we protect ourselves from competition? In this case, assuming our colorful carabiner is selling well. Good question. Really, if I see what you're saying that, you're pretty much just selling the generic product in a generic bag. How do you protect yourself? I guess the honest answer is there's not you can't. Like the way to protect yourself is to differentiate the product, whether it's there's different extents to it. Even just making custom packaging for that product, whilst if the product itself is generic, if you at least do custom packaging, it's still not differentiating it greatly, but it just adds one extra step that someone trying to imitate your product or create a knockoff, they would still need to make the same packaging. So that adds like a little bit of a barrier, but then the best barrier is to actually either bundle your product with something else or physically change it or make some improvements to it. That's the best way to differentiate. So if you are just selling a generic product in just an op bag, I guess the truth is you can't really stop anyone from copying that. You just basically taking the risk of seeing how long you can get away with it before someone copies you. You might nobody. You might be in a situation where nobody does, and you might manage to sell hundreds or thousands of these units, but just know that you're taking the risk that it would be easy for someone to copy if they see that this is a great opportunity and they go in and decide to do the same thing. The way I like to think of this is it's like the more, we always talk about differentiation, and I do think that's the best thing to do to have a long-term product. But if you don't want to do that because of expense or whatever, then you can just sell things generically like this, but just understand that it's probably going to have a shorter shelf life. I guess it's like you might be able to sell it right now, get a bunch of sales, but just know that there's probably going to come a point within a few months or within a shorter period of time where other people are going to come in, sell the exact same thing, and push you out, or it just may no longer become a good product to sell. So yeah, if you want to sell long term, definitely consider differentiating. Otherwise, just try to make the most of it while you can.
Just to add to that, you can also put your branding directly on the product. So if for a small fee from your supplier, they can go in there and probably do a print like just in white, one color, one tone, typically like on metal, or they can, like if it's like a wood product, they can etch it into the product. So I would do that at a minimum if you're just going to use a poly bag. So that way there. Also, if you in the future, like if you run into any issues of someone jumping on your listing and trying to sell, and your listing is what we call hijacked, you have your product. You can show it to Amazon how it should be, and any counterfeit will be removed. So that's probably your best alternative, is starting with your branding on the product. And then of course, if you could do packaging on top of that, as Lenny was talking about, that goes a lot further. So, just try to do that, and should be in good shape.
Cool. All right. Next question is, in your experience, how does PPC cost generally moves for a new product that is selling very well? For example, if we sell 200 units with a high PPC cost of $7 per unit, now for our next batch of inventory, say 2,000 units, can we expect our PPC per unit cost to go down because of the historical sales of 200 units? Let's see. I'm just trying to understand. I think if I'm understanding rightly, I would say no, just because you've received sales in the past through PPC doesn't mean that your PPC cost overall would go down. I would say it's more due to changes on your listing. So anything that you might do on your listing, or changing your price or your images, that's more likely to have an impact on your PPC cost. Or I would think of it as ACOS rather than, it's the same thing, but the ACOS is just a percentage. But yeah, I think those factors are going to play a bigger part in reducing that cost rather than the fact that you've had sales before. But where the historical sales will help you is with your organic ranking. So you might have been on like page 10, but then as you started getting PPC sales through specific keywords, that would be over time helping your organic ranking. So the benefit you would get from historical sales would be your organic ranking for those keywords getting better and better, so that you're starting to get more and more organic sales. So yeah, that's what I would say. Historical sales gives you organic benefit, not so much PPC. Would you say the same thing, Rolando? Or
yeah, I mean, I agree, and that's what it sounds like Rachna was getting at, is if based on maybe the order quantity or like the historical performance. But really PPC comes down to what you do in terms of optimization to your PPC campaigns, as well as what you do to your optimization of your listing. I always like to look at it like the yin and yang. You want both to match in terms of, if there's a solid, in fact, if there's a solid keyword that performed well on your PPC campaigns, you'll want to eventually move that into your listing as well. And if it doesn't fit in, your bullet points, your title, you could put it in as a back-end search term. But they need to coincide. And that's the most effective PPC campaign, is that you've created this yin and yang environment. And so historical information is almost irrelevant. What's most important is how you are going forward with your PPC campaigns and your listing optimization.
Yeah, because I guess what you're getting at is you're thinking maybe in terms of like a social media organic algorithm like YouTube or maybe like TikTok, where it's like if people start to engage with your content, for instance, or in this case, sales, that tells the TikTok or whatever, in this case Amazon, that like, oh, people like this product, I'm going to show it, I'm going to give that person extra benefit. It doesn't work that way with PPC because it's pay to play. It's like if you pay, you get displayed. It's not based off of your historical performance, because if that was the case, then a newcomer would never be able to get in front of audiences, because the people that are already at the top and getting dozens of sales per day, they would be the only people that would be hogging all the PPC slots. Yeah, but we've already covered that, so
No, that's a good point. I think that's probably what it is this isn't a popularity game. This is PPC is definitely really comes down to the highest bidder wins, but at the same token, you don't want to be the highest bidder that doesn't convert, because then you're just wasting money, right? And it all starts with the top of the funnel. I've talked about this in previous coaching calls, that it's a simplified sales funnel, whereas you've literally your top of the funnel is when someone's scrolling and they see your image, they see your title, your price, possibly reviews. Those things are going to impact whether or not the person clicks. So now you paid if that was your sponsored ad, because they clicked and they paid and they took the next step. They landed on your listing, and your listing needs to convert. So it needs to have additional supporting images. We always talk about the different types of images. You want like an info graph. You'll definitely want lifestyle images. The more information you can provide through images, the better. And then, of course, your bullet points that they highlight the benefits, not just the features. And then, a rock solid title with your main keyword there, so on and so forth. Like just all that it reads nice and it flows good. And that if you are brand registered, then, you incorporate A+ content. All of these things are what's helping your listing to convert. The longer they remain on your page, typically you have 3 seconds for a person to either like to click on your listing and move out, just hit the back button, or to continue to scroll and look and see and find like more additional details, see if it's a good fit, and then they buy. So just keep that in mind, that's really how PPC works. The moment you give Amazon money, they're gonna, and if you're the highest bidder, they're gonna display you, but it might not be to your benefit if your listing isn't optimized.
Cool. The next couple of questions are from Edward, who asks, is it normal that the brand name will be the name of my supplier? I've put my supplier name down on the manufacturer during product listing and NA for brand. So I'd say no to that. You actually don't want the brand name to be the same as your supplier. If you think about how this works, you are the brand and your supplier is just that. They're the supplier that are creating the goods behind the scenes. The name of their company, you don't want that as your brand. The brand name is the brand name that you choose. So you're not looking for one. This is actually what you get to choose. You can brand yourself whatever you want. So make sure that the brand name is a name of your choosing. And then when it comes to the manufacturer, to be honest, I don't think it really matters what you put here. Typically, I'd put myself as maybe just the same as the brand name. You can really put whatever you want in the manufacturer, but generally I just put the same as the brand name and classify myself as the manufacturer as well as the brand, but you don't necessarily need to put your supplier down for that. You mentioned you put down NA for brand. That's good to do, or I believe you need to do that if you aren't brand registered. And we've talked about brand registry a lot of times, so I won't go into it, but essentially, if you get brand registered, you unlock more features on Seller Central, and it's a good thing to get at some point. But if you don't have it at the time of creating your listing, you do just want to put NA in that brand field. Otherwise, I think it requires you to put something in there. So unless you are brand registered, just put NA. But yeah, just keep in mind the brand name is your name.
Correct. And the reason you do the not applicable is because it's just a easier process when you do get brand registered to swap out the NA with your brand. Like brand register just goes much smoother. There's not a lot of back and forth, and that's ultimately the reason. And if I'm not mistaken, what I would do for the manufacturer, I would put the brand that I'm trying to get registered for, and by default, I believe that kind of supersedes and that kind of fills that NA section, because they won't show NA to the general public. So in a way, you're kind of you're still displaying your brand name, but without having to, go through the hassle of potentially down the road it becoming complicated to swap out the NA, or the brand that you put on there for the actual brand that you trademark. A lot of that falls down as well as, like, you don't know if you're going to be trademarked for that brand. It could become a challenge if, in fact, when you're going through the trademark process and that trademark is taken, then that's when it becomes a real hassle to try to remove it. So yeah, that's a good strategy.
Cool. The next question from Edward is, how do I make sure my listing is not live, and why my product description is displayed as a big chunk of text? Cool. So we have talked about a couple of scenarios today where you might consider closing your listing, but I'm going to assume what you're talking about is if you haven't got inventory in, you've just created your listing and you're waiting for inventory to be sent in. If that's your scenario, then the good news is that your listing won't be live. You can certainly create your listing, but until you send FBA inventory in, that listing is going to be suppressed or inactive. It won't become active until the inventory arrives. And so what's really great about that is that you can just create your listing really quick. You don't even need to fill in the proper title, description, or even the images. You can just put in placeholders. Doesn't really matter. That allows you to create your listing and then create shipping labels that you can send to your freight forwarder or supplier. And that means you can get the process underway. And whilst your product is being shipped into Amazon, that's the time where you can go back into your listing and make sure that it's all ready to go public. But just know that it won't go live until your stock arrives. And then in terms of why your product description is displayed as a big chunk of text, basically Amazon very recently said they're pulling support for HTML in your description, which basically means you won't be able to use paragraphs, you won't be able to use bold, italics, and formatting, all that sort of thing. You're essentially going to be limited to a big chunk of text, as you said. The best way around that is to get brand registered, and one of the features there is called A+ content. And this is where you can get formatted text and nice images and just really show off your listing really well. So yeah, the basic description, unfortunately, is very basic, but A+ content is a solution in the future when it makes sense for you.
Ooh, looks like we have a couple of questions here in the live. Let me see here. Let's pull that up. Okay, so it looks like the next question comes from ZR. ZR asks, hi guys, when running PPC, would you run both manual and automatic at the same time, or switch between them? I found that I'm spending a lot when running them simultaneously, but rather I've been switching between them whenever the budget is out for one of them. My sales has dropped though. So what do you think is a better approach? Thanks. So the answer to the short answer to that is yes, you do want to run an automatic campaign as well as a manual campaign. And I always preface this with saying there's more than one way to run your PPC campaigns. There's a wrong way, but then there's several right ways that you could do it. And one of the things that you want to do, and the purpose of running the automatic campaign at the same time as you're running a manual campaign, is that these are like discovery or research type campaigns that are helping you find keywords that probably one that you would have never thought of that people are searching for your product, and in particular finding long tail keywords, and so being able to move those types of keywords that you find that are, that convert very well into an exact match campaign. So the way I like to format my PPC campaigns is to have an automatic campaign that's running and a secondary campaign. So that's the first campaign, and the second campaign to have a broad and a phrase match ad group. So the broad, so that way there not a whole lot of budget is being spent. I wouldn't create a campaign for every match type. I would incorporate the broad and the phrase match into one campaign, but split them out into two ad groups so that they're sharing the budget. And then by doing that, I can discover additional keywords. Now, another way to really hone in and minimize the cost of your PPC campaigns is initially don't go for hundreds of keywords. Target a smaller amount of keywords so that your budget can kind of work through and really, perform well. Some people tend to add hundreds of keywords, but that definitely is going to require a higher budget. So if you have the budget, in this case, you're saying you don't, then you don't want to target tons of keywords. You want to target, I'd say, anywhere from like 10 to 20. And then it also is going to be less maintenance on your part. You're not going to have to be optimizing 100, 200 keywords. And just those 10 to 20 keywords are going to give you countless results. So that's why I say, running those two campaigns, put the minimum budget on them for now, $20 on your automatic, $20 on your manual campaign. And over time, give it, 2 weeks or so, because it does need time. Then you could start to take some of those keywords that are performing well and move them into an exact match campaign. So you're going to have 3 campaigns running in the long term. You very rarely shut off PPC campaigns. It's not common because just think about it. Customers are shopping at all hours of the day. You don't know your customer yet as to what their tendencies are, like when they shop for your particular product. And so in the early stages, you're just trying to figure this out. And so you're optimizing your PPC campaigns on a weekly basis based on these results that you're getting back from Amazon. So I would say that those are the main things that I would focus on. Maybe start all over again. It doesn't hurt to pause your campaigns and just kind of rebuild your campaigns if they're not performing that well. And like I said, don't target too many keywords at once. You're going to, in that second campaign that I talked about, that's going to be split out into 2 ad groups, one broad, one phrase. If you're putting in, let's say, 10 keywords there, your 10 main keywords, then what you're going to do is you're just going to match identically in the phrase match, because it's going to give you different results because of the match type, and see how that performs. Like I said, your budget will extend a little longer throughout the day. It probably won't run out because you don't have hundreds of keywords that Amazon's trying to, figure out. And then over time, just continue to optimize them. And like I said, move those keywords, the main keywords, the good performing keywords, into an exact match campaign. And then I know this is hard to visualize. I'm trying to paint a picture. But then the next thing would be to move those ones that you moved into the exact match, negate them in your automatic campaign and in your manual campaign for the broad and phrase. And you negate that so that you're not double dipping there.
Cool. Yeah, I think the only other thing I could add is, I think the important question here as well, which we don't know, but is how profitable are each of these campaigns performing? So you've got an automatic and a manual at the moment, and your, one budget runs out, or you're just running one at a time, then the other at the time. Really, you should be making sure that you're checking the performance. How is one going versus the other? And that should really help you determine what you're running and so on. But like Rolando said, I wouldn't recommend turning I would recommend running both of them because there is a purpose to both of them that Rolando pointed out. But if you're spending more than you are comfortable with at the moment, rather than turning one off, I would just perhaps reduce the budget of one or both. Maybe depending on if the manual campaign is performing better at the moment, then maybe just reduce the budget a little bit on the automatic. Don't turn it off, but maybe just reduce the spend if that's not performing as well, just as a quick fix at the moment.
All right, looks like Dennis has the next question.
All
Hey
right.
guys, I have been looking into a category that has good demand and a good opportunity score. There are multiple items that are sold into sets, and the only difference is, let's see, sorry, I have to expand it. I can't, let's see. Okay, let me start over. There are multiple items that are sold into sets, and the only differentiation is the different items and combinations on this product. I cannot really change the items or brand the items inside except for the package. Would you suggest looking for a product I can modify further for a first product launch, or can I DM you the idea to get some honest feedback? Just off the top, you can send us if you want. Just message me right now if you're on the call still, and I can look at it. However, based on what you've provided so far, I would, for a first product, I wouldn't focus too much on modification, because in order to modify a product substantially, one, it's going to require that you get a mold from your supplier, or you have to pay for the mold. So this is an additional cost in addition to they already have a template of what the product is, and they just slap your label on it. Maybe they etch it or they engrave it onto your product. But that's going to, by having to add a mold and the back and forth, maybe you'll have to hire someone that can create these renderings, these drawings for you to modify your product. So really modifying a product as your first product launch is not probably the most optimal way of getting started. The optimal way is to maybe bundle a product, as Lenny talked about earlier, bundling another product, a matching product. I don't know if that's an option. I think you mentioned that it's not.
Or I think maybe he was saying that bundling is an option. There are multiple items sold into different. I think maybe he's saying that he can bundle, but should he go that step further and differentiate the actual individual products themselves, or one of them, or something?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me know.
I'd agree with you.
Let me know if you're able to message me the product, and I could take a quick look at it right now. But if you're still on the call, let me know if you've messaged me. Other than that, we've come to the end of the questions.
Oh, actually, I think there's one other one I can see here between those last two. The last one that I can see here is from Stephen, that says, can you change your listing price? For example, let's say I ordered everything and my numbers were a few dollars off before the product goes live. Can I adjust the price up and down? That's a nice, easy one to wrap up on. Yes, you absolutely can. You can change your price at any time. Not a problem. You just go into manage inventory, change your price. This is, very common practice. People sort of change their prices all the time. So no stress if you set it at the start and then you realize that you needed to make it higher or that sort of thing. Like I mentioned earlier, the great thing is you can create a listing. It's not live until the product comes in. So you can just set your price, or you don't have to figure it out at the moment you create your listing. You can come back, as long as you do it before the product arrives at Amazon and goes live, then you can change it. And then even once your listing is live, you can change your price at any time.
Yeah. And since we still have a little extra time, I want to just share a really cool tool with you, Dennis, that if you're trying to figure out the perfect price, this will be a lifesaver. Splitly.com. Splitly is the app, and essentially you can, what you'll put is you'll put like a price range of what would be, what would be the best price, the optimal price to list your product at. So this takes just the guesswork out of it. This is going to do a split test that's going to essentially, over time, it's going to find a winner for you in the price range that benefits you the most. So that's something, if down the road, if you want to consider, I'll just put it there for you so that you can utilize it.
Yeah, actually looks like we got one more question that just got dropped in here. Hi guys, do you know of a photographer that can take product photos of large items? The item is about 12 by 9 foot. I haven't been able to find in the Jungle Scout market. Yes, I do have a recommendation here. It's productphotography.com. I've used them before for a oversized item. I think I can't remember now. They got back to me and said, your item is bigger than 3 feet or something, but they have sort of a standard size, and then anything above that, they can do it. They just charge more. And I think it cost me $95 extra per photo or per item or something. So you do have to pay a fee, but I am aware that they can do larger size products, or at least they would be, yours does sound very, very large, but I'd reach out to them. That's probably your best bet. They seem to cater to a wide variety of needs, but they certainly were able to do that for me.
All right. Oh, it looks like Dennis has a follow-up question on that, but I also dropped the link for product photography in the description there in the comment section. Let's see, Dennis says, quick question, what is the best way to direct messages to you? So you were honestly, like, I get bombarded with messages. So I don't really reply on Messenger, just because hundreds of messages are coming through, and I have on live, I could probably chase a message down and try to find it. But what I would suggest is to reach out to support@freedombuilderbootcamp.com. They'll be able to answer any questions. That's as a member, you're essentially going to be, you're a VIP. So any requests, any questions that you have, you'll be at the top, you'll be put at the top of the queue. So my recommendation is to always go directly with them. During the live coaching sessions, obviously, I'll field any questions that you may have. So if you ever wanted to live, I won't share it with the actual product itself, but I can make a generalized recommendation for you. But other than that, because I don't really ever go into my Messenger, I would say thousands of messages there that I just can't get to. So.
All right, it looks like that kind of wraps up all of our questions for today. As always, thank you all for dropping lots of questions in. Hopefully you got some value from this. I've really enjoyed being here and answering questions. This week, I definitely will be back in a future call, but yeah, hope you all got some value from today.
Awesome. Thank you all, and keep crushing it, Freedom Builders. See you next week.